The evening had started like any other. I was in the living room, flipping through channels on TV, when I heard the front door creak open. Lisa stepped in, her cheeks red and her ponytail looking like it had been hastily thrown together. She mentioned she'd gone out for a late walk to clear her head. She dropped her sneakers by the door with a thud and hung her jacket on the banister, her breathing uneven like she'd been rushing. "Nice walk?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the screen but listening closely. "Yeah," she said, a little too casually, grabbing a soda can from the counter. "Needed some fresh air." Something wasn't adding up. The faintest trace of something sharp lingered in the air, like cheap cologne or stale beer. I paused for a moment, unsure if I was imagining it. She wandered toward the bedroom, her steps unusually brisk. "I'll quickly hop in the shower," she called out, not even turning to look at me. I thought for a second about how I hadn't managed to get in the shower first. With a shrug, I decided I'd just wait until she was done before heading in myself. A few minutes later, she emerged, hair wrapped in a towel. "All yours," she said, disappearing into the bedroom without much of a glance. I headed into the bathroom, pulling off my shirt as I went. As I undressed, my eyes caught something in the corner of the laundry basket. A corner of fabric was sticking out of the pocket of her jeans. It was her underwear. Damp, crumpled, and shoved into the pocket of her jeans. The inside of the jeans themselves felt wet to the touch. I stared at them, my mind reeling as the realization hit me. There was no doubt left about what had happened. I stood in the bathroom, jeans still in hand. My thoughts swirled, each one darker than the last, but the evidence was right there, and there was no denying it. I tossed the jeans back into the laundry basket, trying to steady my breathing. Lisa was in the bedroom now, the low creak of the mattress letting me know she'd settled in. I wanted to confront her, but something held me back. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more like the need for answers. Real answers, not just the ones I'd convince myself to believe if I didn't dig deeper. I stepped into the bedroom, trying to keep my breathing steady. Lisa was on the bed, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. For a second, I thought about turning around, pretending I hadn't found anything, but then I reminded myself that the evidence was sitting right there in the laundry basket. The jeans. The underwear. The smell of stale cologne. "Lisa," I said, my voice even but sharp enough to slice through the room. "Do you want to explain what happened to your jeans?" She froze mid-scroll, her fingers hovering over the screen. "What?" she asked, blinking up at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "Your jeans," I repeated, stepping closer to the bed. "The ones you tossed in the laundry. Something doesn't add up." Her brow furrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice a mix of confusion and forced calm. "Oh, come on," I said, letting out a humorless laugh. "You seriously expect me to believe you don't know? You went for a walk, came back looking like you ran a marathon, and now your jeans. Well, let's just say they tell a different story." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She was scrambling, trying to think of a response, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. Before she could say anything, I took another step forward and snatched the phone out of her hands. "Hey!" she yelped, reaching for it, but I held it out of her reach. "No, no," I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "You've had plenty of time with this. Let's see what you've been up to." Her eyes widened. "Give it back. You can't just." "Oh, I can," I said. "And I will. Let's see. Texts, shall we?" I scrolled through her messages, ignoring her protests. It didn't take long to find them. Nick. The name jumped out at me like a flashing neon sign. I opened the conversation and started reading, my stomach twisting with every line. Asterisk. He doesn't suspect a thing. Asterisk. Asterisk. Can't wait to see you again. Asterisk. Asterisk. Tonight was amazing. Asterisk. My hands shook, but I kept scrolling. There were photos too, nothing explicit, but enough to make my blood boil. Well, I said, turning the phone so she could see the screen. Looks like your little walk was more eventful than you let on. Care to explain who Nick is? Her face went pale. It's not what you think. Oh, spare me, I snapped, cutting her off. It's exactly what I think. And you know what? Let's get Nick's side of the story, shall we? Before she could stop me, I hit the call button on her phone. The line rang once, twice, and then he picked up. Hello, a man's voice said. Nick, right? I said, my voice calm but ice cold. This is Lisa's husband. Care to explain what's been going on between you two? There was a long pause. Then, without a word, he hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, then let out a bitter laugh. Coward, I muttered, tossing the phone onto the bed. Lisa reached for it, but I grabbed it again before she could. Not so fast, I said. You don't get this back until I've taken screenshots of every single one of these messages. And after that, I'll be checking your photos and every app on here. Because guess what, Lisa? This isn't just a betrayal. It's evidence. And I plan to use it when I file for divorce. Her mouth opened again, but no words came out. I didn't wait for her to recover. I started snapping screenshots, ignoring the way she sat there, frozen and silent. When I was done, I set the phone on the dresser, far out of her reach, and turned to leave the room. You might want to start thinking about where you're going to stay tonight, I said over my shoulder. Because it sure as hell won't be here. I walked out, leaving her in stunned silence, and closed the door behind me. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking, but I felt something I hadn't felt in hours. Clarity. This was just the beginning, but I'd already made up my mind. There was no going back. I was in the living room, phone in hand, scrolling through Lisa's messages and snapping screenshots. Each new message made my stomach churn, but I stayed focused. If she thought she could weasel her way out of this, she had another thing coming. Evidence was king, and I wasn't about to let her wiggle out of this mess without consequences. Lisa came stumbling into the living room, her face streaked with tears, her voice shaky. Please, just listen to me, she begged. You've misunderstood. I can explain. I didn't even look up. Oh, really? Misunderstood. Let me guess. You were texting Nick about how great his cooking skills are? Or maybe you were just friends who happened to spend some extra special quality time together. Save it, Lisa. She took a step closer, her sobs growing louder. I mean it, you've got it all wrong. Those messages don't mean anything. Lisa, I said, finally meeting her eyes, my tone dripping with sarcasm. You literally told him I don't suspect a thing. But sure, tell me more about how this is just one big misunderstanding. Enlighten me. Her face crumpled, and then, like clockwork, she shifted tactics. You never pay attention to me, she shouted, her voice rising. You're always so busy with work or distracted by everything else. What did you expect me to do? I let out a sharp laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be kind. Oh, there it is. The classic, it's your fault I cheated routine. Bravo, Lisa. Truly original. But let me make one thing clear. You didn't cheat because I didn't pay attention to you. You cheated because you're selfish. She flinched at that, but I wasn't done. And you know what else? I continued, my voice colder now. Under the terms of the marriage contract, the one you happily signed, you know what happens when someone cheats? The cheating spouse walks away with nothing. Not the house, not the car, not even the toaster. Nothing, Lisa. Her eyes widened as she realized the full weight of her situation. Please, she said, her voice cracking, tears streaming down her face. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away. I'll do anything. Just forgive me, please. I stared at her for a long moment, then shook my head. Forgive you? You must think I'm some kind of idiot. This isn't just a mistake, Lisa. You made a choice. And now you get to live with the consequences. She dropped to her knees, sobbing into her hands. At least let me stay here until I can find a place to live, she choked out. Please. I have nowhere else to go. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Fine, I said finally, my voice hard. You can stay, for now. But don't get too comfortable. And don't think for a second this changes anything. She nodded, still sobbing, as I stood and walked past her, phone in hand. Oh, and Lisa? I called over my shoulder. I'm sleeping in the guest room. You might want to start looking up apartments tomorrow. I didn't wait for a response. I went to the guest room, shut the door, and locked it. For the first time in hours, I let myself exhale. I wasn't sure what came next, but one thing was clear. This was the end of Lisa and me. There was no going back. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, staring at the blank wall, Lisa's phone still sitting next to me. The events of the night replayed in my head like a broken record I couldn't turn off. Each message I had read, every lie she told me when I confronted her, and that desperate look in her eyes, all of it churned in my mind, feeding an anger I hadn't felt in years. Anger was the first thing to hit me. Hot, searing, all-consuming. How dare she? After everything I'd done for her, after the years we'd spent together, building a life, sharing dreams, making plans. She threw it all away for what? For Nick. Some guy who couldn't even stay on the phone long enough to explain himself? The thought of him made my blood boil, but it was Lisa's betrayal that cut the deepest. She'd made the choice. She'd let it happen. She'd lied to my face. I clenched my fists, my knuckles whitening. The guest room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in. I tried to focus on my breathing to calm myself down, but the betrayal kept clawing its way back to the forefront of my thoughts. I wasn't the one who destroyed us. She was. I was just the idiot who trusted her. Then the anger gave way to something colder, heavier, sadness. A wave of it crashed over me, unexpected and relentless. I thought about all the moments we'd shared, the good ones, before everything fell apart. The lazy Sunday mornings we spent in bed, talking about nothing and everything. The vacations where we laughed until our stomachs hurt. The way she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I buried my face in my hands. How had we gone from that to this? To a marriage where she felt the need to seek out someone else? To lying, sneaking around, and messages with a man who wasn't me? It was like everything we'd built had been reduced to rubble overnight, and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out what the hell went wrong. Sleep was out of the question. My mind was racing too fast, my emotions ping-ponging between rage and heartbreak. I tried lying down, but the pillow felt like a rock, and the blanket felt suffocating. I couldn't shake the thought of her sitting in the other room, just a few feet away, as if this were any ordinary night. How could she sleep after what she'd done? Did she even feel guilty? Or was she already texting Nick again, making plans for when she moved out? The idea of being under the same roof as her made my skin crawl. The walls of the guest room seemed to shrink with every passing minute. I needed to breathe, to do something. Anything. I stood up and paced the room, my thoughts circling the same drain. She betrayed me. She lied. She ruined everything. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Staying silent wasn't an option. I stormed out of the guest room, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. The hallway felt longer than usual, but I didn't slow down. Her door was cracked open, and I pushed it wider without bothering to knock. She was sitting on the bed, her face pale, her eyes puffy from crying. For a split second, I thought she might say something, but I didn't give her the chance. "This isn't working," I said, my voice flat but laced with sarcasm. Her lip trembled, but I didn't care. "I can't stay here with you, Lisa. Every second under this roof makes me want to claw my way out. You've destroyed everything we had, and now you expect me to just sit here and pretend like it's fine." "I said I was sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh, sorry," I snapped, letting out a bitter laugh. "Wow, Lisa. That fixes everything. Thanks for that. I feel so much better now that you've said the magic word. Her tears started again, but they didn't move me. Not this time. Look, I said, my tone hardening. You need to figure out where you're going. Tonight, tomorrow, I don't care. But you need to start packing your things. I'll give you some time to figure it out. But this? This is over. She sobbed harder, but I didn't flinch. Do you even understand what you've done? I asked, my voice sharp. You didn't just hurt me. You burned everything to the ground. And for what? A few messages? A few hours with Nick? Was it worth it? Please, she said, her voice breaking. I don't have anywhere to go. Just give me some time. I crossed my arms, staring her down. Fine, I said coldly. You can stay for a few days. But don't mistake this for forgiveness or some kind of second chance. You've already used up whatever goodwill I had left. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against the wall for a moment, closing my eyes and exhaling slowly. The house was silent, but it felt anything but peaceful. This wasn't the life I'd signed up for. It wasn't the life I deserved. And now, it was up to me to figure out what came next, without her. I sat in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, while the sound of Lisa's packing filtered through the walls. It was almost rhythmic, the thud of drawers opening and closing, the shuffle of clothes being stuffed into a bag. Half the night, that sound kept me awake, though I couldn't say it was the noise that bothered me. It was the reality of what it meant. She was leaving, and I wasn't stopping her. Part of me wondered if she thought I'd change my mind, that hearing her pack might spark some last-minute pity or regret. But regret wasn't in the cards for me. She'd made her bed, with Nick no less, and now she was finally doing something useful by leaving. I tried to sleep, but it never came. My thoughts kept circling the drain, replaying the events of the last 24 hours like a highlight reel from a bad movie. Her lies. The texts. That pathetic attempt to pin it all on me for not paying attention to her. The nerve of it still made me laugh. What kind of logic was that? By morning, the house was eerily quiet. I wasn't sure if she'd left yet, but I didn't really care. Eventually, I got up, ran a hand through my hair, and made my way to the kitchen. She was standing there by the counter, her bag slung over one shoulder. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying all night. I'm going to stay with a friend for a while, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the sound of the liquid hitting the mug louder than her words. I didn't bother looking at her. Cool, I said flatly, taking a sip. Have fun. She stared at me like she was waiting for something. An argument, a plea, a shred of emotion. But I gave her nothing. I'd spent too long letting her occupy space in my head, and I wasn't about to give her another inch. Is that all you have to say? She asked, her voice cracking. I set my mug down and looked at her for the first time. What do you want me to say, Lisa? Oh no, please stay and keep lying to my face? Or maybe, don't go, I'm sure Nick's a great guy? Sorry, I'm all out of sympathy. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't mean for this to happen, she muttered, looking down at the floor. And yet it did, I shot back. You meant to text him. You meant to meet him. And you meant to lie to me every step of the way. So forgive me if your intentions don't really move the needle for me. She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. You know what? Don't. I've heard enough excuses to last me a lifetime. That seemed to be the final nail in the coffin. She nodded silently, turned, and walked toward the door. The sound of it closing behind her was the most satisfying thing I'd heard all night. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee going cold as I stared out the window. For the first time in years, the house felt empty, but not in a bad way. It wasn't the kind of emptiness that needed filling. It was the kind that came with clarity, with finally letting go of something that had been weighing me down. I wasn't second-guessing myself. There were no what-ifs, no lingering doubts about whether I'd made the right decision. Trust is fragile, I realized, like a pane of glass. Once it's shattered, no amount of tape or glue will ever make it whole again. Lisa had taken a sledgehammer to ours, and there was no going back. By the time I finished my coffee, I'd already decided my next steps. Filing for divorce was at the top of the list. I didn't want this dragging out any longer than necessary. The sooner I got it done, the sooner I could close this chapter of my life for good. The rest of the day was surprisingly productive. I called a lawyer, made an appointment, and started looking at ways to separate our accounts and untangle the financial mess of our marriage. For once, I wasn't dreading the paperwork or the hassle. If anything, it felt good, like I was finally reclaiming control over my life. That night, I sat in the living room, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge. I thought about everything Lisa and I had been through, the good times, the laughter, the plans we'd made for the future. It was bittersweet, remembering the version of us that had existed before the lies, before the betrayal. But that version wasn't real anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I realized I wasn't just mourning the loss of her. I was mourning the loss of who I thought she was. The Lisa I married, the one I trusted with everything, didn't exist. Maybe she never had. But even as the sadness lingered, there was something else taking its place: resolve. Lisa's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just a chapter, one I was more than ready to close. I didn't know what the future looked like, but I knew one thing for sure: it wouldn't include her. As I sat there, I couldn't help but think about how fragile trust really is. It's the foundation of everything, and once it's gone, there's no rebuilding. But that realization didn't leave me bitter. If anything, it made me stronger. I knew what I deserved now, and I wasn't going to settle for less. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in a house that was finally mine again. No lies, no betrayal, just a fresh start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt okay with that.